Officer Harris wiped mustard off his fingers, the last bite of his sandwich still fresh in his mouth. His shift had been long, and the cold was settling in. The alley beside him was dark, quiet, almost forgotten by the city. He felt eyes on him. Not danger, just something else. He turned his head slightly and saw it. A dog, filthy, bones poking through patchy fur. His body shook from the cold, but his eyes, they didn't beg. They asked, "Can I eat with you?" They seemed to say. Harris didn't move at first. He just stared back, unsure why his heart suddenly tightened. The dog didn't bark, didn't growl, didn't step forward, just looked. Slowly, Harris reached into his paper bag, pulled out a soft corner of bread, and slid it across the pavement. "Here, you want this, buddy?" The dog flinched, hesitated, then stepped forward, cautiously, as if waiting to be hit. "No one's gonna hurt you. Take it." The creature leaned in, took the bread gently, too gently for a stray used to fighting for scraps. "Good boy," Harris murmured. The dog didn't leave. After swallowing, he sat, just sat, looking at him. No tail wag, no begging for more, just present. "You waiting on someone?" Harris joked, voice softer now. The dog tilted his head. "All right, well, I've got one more slice left. It's got some cheese, but I'm warning you, dry as sandpaper." He tore off another piece, tossed it over. This time the dog didn't hesitate. "You got a name?" Harris asked. The dog licked his lips, then slowly walked closer, stopping just an arm's length away. "You want to sit with me?" The dog lay down. That was it. Just lay there like he'd been doing it his whole life. Harris looked away, tried to shake the feeling growing in his chest. "You're not gonna follow me, are you?" The dog didn't move. Harris sighed. "I got rules, you know. Can't bring strays, can't feed 'em, can't." But still, he took off his jacket and laid it gently beside the dog. "Just for tonight, one night, then we go our separate ways." The dog lowered his head onto the coat, eyes closing for the first time in what looked like forever. Officer Harris leaned back against the wall, silent. He didn't know that look. Those quiet eyes would be the start of everything. And neither did the dog, who had no name, no home, but finally, maybe, a chance. Harris didn't plan to stay long, just a few minutes, just until the dog fell asleep. But minutes passed, then more, and he didn't leave. The dog's breathing was slow, steady now, like he finally felt safe. "Guess you needed rest more than food," Harris whispered. Snow started to fall, soft flakes landing on the brim of Harris's cap. The city had gone quiet, but inside his chest, something stirred, something unfamiliar. He looked down. The dog twitched in his sleep, paws moving like he was chasing something. Maybe in his dreams he was warm, maybe fed, maybe loved. "You've done this before," Harris said, watching him closely. Waited, hoped, and people just walked past. The dog let out a soft whimper, eyes still shut. "You waited again tonight," Harris continued. "But this time, I stopped." A sudden wind picked up, cold slicing through Harris's shirt. He reached for his coat, then remembered it was under the dog. "Great," he muttered, rubbing his arms. "Now I'm freezing too." The dog stirred, opened one eye. "Go back to sleep," Harris chuckled. "You stole my coat. Least you could do is stay quiet." The dog rested his head again. A few steps echoed at the alley's end. Harris straightened up. A man passed by without looking in. Just another pedestrian. Another moment where the world didn't notice. But Harris had. "You got no collar," he said. "No tags. So you're alone." He paused, then added, "Me too, The dog stretched slightly, brushing his paw against Harris's boot. It was small, barely a touch. But Harris felt it like a jolt. He reached down, gently rubbed behind the dog's ear. The dog didn't pull away. You trust easy for someone who's probably been kicked more than fed. The wind howled again. Harris looked toward his squad car parked down the street. The heater would be warm, the seat soft, and there was a blanket in the trunk. He looked back at the dog. "Okay," he muttered, standing up. "You win." The dog's ears perked. Harris nodded. "Come on, you're not staying out here tonight." The dog didn't hesitate. He stood still, weak, but ready. He followed Harris like he'd been doing it all his life. As they reached the car, Harris opened the door and patted the seat. Front row, buddy. The dog jumped in slowly, curled tight, eyes blinking at the warmth. Harris smiled. One night, he said again, but deep down, he already knew it was a lie. Rusty stayed low in the old shed behind the station, curled on a faded blanket. Harris had snuck from the evidence room. The walls were thin, wind crept in through the cracks, but it was better than the streets. Still, word got around. By morning the barking gave him away. "What's that noise?" Officer Griggs snapped, walking past the back lot. Harris stood in front of the shed door, arms crossed. "Just some raccoons." Griggs narrowed his eyes. "That raccoon better not have 4 legs, a collar," and answer to Rusty. Inside, Rusty sneezed. Griggs rolled his eyes. "He's just a dog, Harris." But Harris didn't move. "He's not just anything." Later, inside the break room, voices rose. "This is a police station, not a pound." Someone shouted. "Fleas, smells, barking. It's a mess." Captain Morris leaned back in his chair. "You know the policy, Harris. No strays allowed. We're not running a rescue." Harris stood firm. "He doesn't make trouble. He just needs time." "And where's he staying? In your locker?" Harris didn't blink. "In the shed." The room fell silent. Then laughter. "You serious?" An officer chuckled. "You hiding a dog like it's a stolen donut?" Harris didn't laugh. After the meeting, he walked back to the shed. Rusty wagged his tail once, slow, as if he understood the tension in the air. "They don't get it," Harris whispered, kneeling down. "They didn't see your eyes that night." Rusty nudged his head into Harris's chest. "You're more than a stray. You didn't beg. You asked. Like you were trying to speak." He pulled a small snack from his pocket and handed it over. "You saved me too, you know." Rusty ate gently, then lay back down. As the days passed, things got harder. Someone threw out Rusty's blanket. Another officer sprayed the shed, just in case. But Harris kept showing up with food, with care, with quiet words that only Rusty heard. "You're not going anywhere," he'd say, but the pressure kept building. One morning, Harris arrived to find the shed door open. Rusty was gone. Heart pounding, he searched the yard, the alley, the street. Rusty, Rusty, then a bark, weak, but familiar. Behind the dumpsters, curled up and shivering, was Rusty. "You came back." Harris breathed. He lifted him gently. "You're not just a dog. You're mine now, and I'm yours." And with that unspoken promise, he carried Rusty home. This time, not to hide him, but to keep him. The clinic smelled like alcohol and sadness. Rusty shook in Harris's arms, not from fear, but maybe from memories. Memories that Harris couldn't see, but the vet could. Dr. Kim flipped through the x-rays, her face falling with every page. "Broken ribs," she murmured. "Old ones, probably from being kicked several times." Harris clenched his jaw. "What else?" She sighed. "Cigarette burns on his side. Fractures in the front leg, healed badly. Someone hurt him." Repeatedly. Rusty sat on the table, still quiet, like he'd learned long ago that noise only made things worse. Dr. Kim crouched beside him. "He's not just injured. He's endured." Harris knelt beside her, rubbing Rusty's ear. "How did you survive, boy?" he whispered. Rusty leaned into him, slow and trusting. The vet watched, surprised. "He trusts you. Dogs like this, they usually don't trust anyone." Harris nodded. "He looked at me like I was the first person who ever saw him." Dr. Kim gave him a bottle of medicine, painkillers, some ointment too. "He'll need time and care, a lot of it." "I've got both," Harris replied. Back home, Harris made up a bed from old towels and laid Rusty down gently. "You've been through more than most people I know," he said, kneeling beside him. "And yet, here you are, still gentle, still good." Rusty licked his hand. As Harris cleaned the wounds, he noticed something. Rusty never flinched, never growled. It was like he'd accepted pain as part of life. "You don't have to be scared anymore," Harris said softly. "Not here." For the next few days they settled into a quiet rhythm. Harris worked night shifts, came home tired, but Rusty was always waiting by the door, tail wagging slow and steady. One night, Harris sat on the floor beside him. "You know, I never thought I needed anyone. Just me, my badge and the street." He looked into Rusty's tired eyes. "But then you showed up, all broken, and somehow, you're the one healing me." Rusty rested his head on Harris's lap, and for a long moment, neither of them moved. Outside, the wind howled. But inside it was warm, not from the heater, but from something deeper. Rusty had been burned, beaten, thrown away. But he hadn't given up, and now, with each passing day, his eyes started to change, less haunted, more alive. The scars were still there, but so was hope. The apartment was small, bare walls, a squeaky floor, and a single lamp that flickered sometimes. But to Rusty, it was heaven. No barking dogs, no cold pavement, no yelling voices, just quiet and Harris. Harris dropped his keys on the counter, then looked down at Rusty, who stood frozen near the door. His tail was still, his eyes wide. "This is it," Harris said, kicking off his boots. "Home." Rusty didn't move. No cage, no chains, just you, me, and that old blanket. He pointed to a soft corner near the couch, where he'd laid down a folded quilt. Rusty stepped forward slowly, sniffing the air. His paws made no sound. Every inch he walked, he kept looking back at Harris, like he was checking if it was okay. "It's yours," Harris said gently. "You're safe here." Rusty didn't lay down, though. Not yet. He followed Harris to the couch, sitting a few feet away, never taking his eyes off him. Harris chuckled. "What, you guarding me now?" Rusty tilted his head. "Well, fair enough. I guess we watch out for each other." As the night stretched on, Harris dozed off, still in his uniform, legs hanging off the couch. Rusty stayed awake all night. He didn't bark, didn't whimper. He just sat, eyes locked on Harris, like if he blinked, this would disappear, like it had before. At some point in the dark, Harris stirred, half awake, and whispered, "It's real, Rusty. You're home." That was all Rusty needed to hear. By morning, the sun crept in through the blinds. Harris blinked against the light, groaning as he sat up, and that's when he saw him. Rusty curled tightly at his feet, fast asleep, mouth twitching, paws stretched, no tension in his body, just rest. Harris smiled, rubbing his face. "You finally let go, huh?" He got up quietly, careful not to wake him. He made coffee, toast, sat at the table. Rusty didn't stir, not until the plate clinked. Then one sleepy eye opened. Harris laughed softly. "Oh, now you wake up. I see how it is." Rusty stood, walked over, and laid his head on Harris's knee. It wasn't begging. It was, "You're welcome, buddy," Harris said, sliding half his toast toward him. "Anytime." And in that quiet morning, over shared toast and silence, a bond was sealed, not between man and dog, but between two souls that had finally found home. It was just a normal afternoon. Harris had the day off. The sun was kind, and Rusty's limp was getting better. "Come on, partner," Harris said, clipping on a leash. "Let's show this neighborhood your fancy walk." Rusty's ears perked up. He stood tall, well, as tall as his old bones allowed. They made their way to the park, Harris in plain clothes, Rusty in his usual nothing. No vest, no badge, just a second-hand collar, and pride in every step. Families strolled, kids played, birds chirped somewhere above. As they passed a bench, a little girl with pigtails pointed, eyes wide. "Mom, look, a police dog." Harris stopped, surprised. Her mother smiled. "He does look brave, doesn't he?" Harris chuckled, kneeling beside Rusty. "Well, you're not wrong. Can I pet him?" the girl asked, already stepping forward. Harris nodded. "If he lets you." Rusty looked up at him, then wagged his tail just once. The girl reached out and gently stroked his head. "He's soft," she whispered. "He's strong," Harris replied. Unseen, a bystander across the path lifted their phone and hit record. The video was short, just a cop with a rough-looking dog, a child petting him, and Harris saying, "He wasn't always this way. He just needed a chance." By that night, the clip was posted. By morning, it was everywhere. Rescued stray walks beside hero cop, from alley to badge-worthy. Rusty the survivor melts hearts. Messages poured in. People wanted to know Rusty's story. Who is this dog? Where can I donate? Will he become a real? Harris scrolled through the comments, stunned. He looked at Rusty sleeping by the couch. "You went viral, buddy," he whispered. "People see you now." Rusty snored softly. The department called. Reporters wanted interviews. A news van parked outside. Captain Morris called him into the office. "We're getting attention. Good attention." Harris raised a brow. "You're not mad?" The captain shrugged. "The world's hard. They needed this. We needed this." By the next week, a small ceremony was held. No badge, no official title, but a collar with Rusty's name and a golden tag that read, "Honorary K9, Rusty." Harris clipped it on himself. Rusty sat proudly, tail wagging. "You earned this," Harris whispered. and that broken he stood tall, not as a victim, but as a symbol of what love and a second chance can do. The sirens tore through the night like knives, loud, sharp, flashing red across the walls. Harris didn't think much of it at first, just another chase, another call somewhere else. But Rusty froze mid-step, ears pinned back, eyes wide. Then came the panic. He bolted, claws scrambling on the floor, trying to run from a memory only he could see. He dove under the bed, shaking hard, eyes wild with fear. "Rusty," Harris called, but the dog didn't respond. He scratched at the wall like it might open and let him escape. Whimpers spilled out of him, soft, desperate, not from pain, but something deeper. "Hey, hey," Harris dropped to the floor, crawling under the bed with him. "It's okay, boy. I got you." Rusty flinched as Harris touched him, then slowly pressed into his chest, like a child hiding in his father's coat. Harris wrapped his arms around him, heart breaking. "You're safe. They're not coming for you. Not anymore." The sirens faded, but Rusty kept trembling. "It's just noise now," Harris whispered. "Just noise. It can't hurt you." He stayed there with him, cramped and cold on the hardwood floor, his hand rubbing slow circles behind Rusty's ear. Minutes passed, maybe more. Finally Rusty's breathing slowed. His head sank onto Harris's arm, his eyes heavy but still watchful. "You've been through things I can't even imagine," Harris said softly, "but you don't have to go through them alone anymore." Rusty licked his wrist, just once. They didn't move the rest of the night. Harris stayed beside him, half under the bed, half in the quiet glow of the hallway light. By morning, Rusty crawled out first, not fully better, not healed, but trusting. Harris followed, stretching his stiff back. "Well, that was a sleepover I didn't plan." Rusty bumped his nose into Harris's leg. "An apology, maybe, or thanks." Later that day, Harris called the vet. "He had a panic attack," he explained. Dr. Kim sighed on the other end. "It'll happen. Trauma isn't just physical. Sometimes it stays hidden. So what do I do?" "Just keep doing what you're doing," she said. "Stay beside him. That's what heals most." Harris looked at Rusty curled beside his boots. "You hear that?" he said. "You don't have to fight alone anymore." Rusty blinked up at him. The past still chased him sometime, but now, for the first time, someone was chasing with him. Harris sat at the kitchen table, Rusty asleep at his feet, the old metal tag turning slowly in his fingers. It had been tucked under the newer collar, scratched, and barely readable, just a number and a faded shelter code. Curiosity tugged at him. The next morning, he made a call. "Yeah, that's one of ours," the woman on the phone said. "Code 73B. Can you bring him in?" An hour later, Harris stood at the front desk of a small shelter on the edge of town. Rusty stayed close, tail down but not tucked, like he remembered too much. The manager came out, gray-haired, kind eyes, hands worn from years of holding broken animals. She knelt slowly. "Rusty," she whispered. Rusty didn't move. "I remember him," she said quietly, standing again. "We called him Bandit back then. Found him in a box behind a diner, barely alive." Harris swallowed. "What happened to him?" she sighed, leading him into a small office. A file folder landed on the desk, thin, but heavy. "He was adopted once by a young couple, brought back after 2 weeks. Why?" "Too timid. Wouldn't play. Just stared at walls." Harris looked down at Rusty. "Second adoption lasted 4 days, she added. "The guy said he was broken, useless." Rusty rested his head on Harris's boot, like he'd heard every word. "And after that, no one came. He was with us for months. Quiet, gentle, never barked. But people want happy dogs, loud ones. He wasn't that." Harris's voice was tight. "He still isn't," the manager nodded. "But he's watching you like you're his whole world." Harris knelt, looked into Rusty's eyes. "You were never broken. They just didn't wait long enough to see you shine." The manager smiled softly. "You're the first person he's come back with," wagging his tail. They left with a copy of his old file, a photo of Rusty as a pup, thin, scared, sitting in the corner of a metal kennel. Back at the apartment, Harris pinned the photo on the fridge. "See that guy?" he said, pointing. Rusty looked up. "That's who they gave up on." "But me?" Harris smiled, kneeling to his level. "I see someone who made it through all of that, and still loves." Rusty licked his cheek. "Too timid, too broken?" Harris whispered. "Not anymore." Rusty wagged once. Slow. He had been returned, forgotten. But now, he was home, forever. The radio crackled. Fire reported. Elm Street. Possible entrapment. Harris slammed his coffee down, grabbed his gear, and whistled. Let's go, Rusty. Rusty jumped up, alert. No hesitation, no fear, just focus. They reached the scene in minutes. Smoke curled into the sky, thick and black. Flames licked the edges of the old house. A woman screamed near the curb. My son. He's still inside. Firefighters rushed to contain the blaze, but the front door was barely hanging on. The windows too hot to break through. Harris looked down. Rusty. Rusty looked back, then ran, straight into the smoke. Wait, Rusty, a firefighter shouted. But it was too late. He was gone. Harris's heart pounded. The seconds dragged. Inside, Rusty moved low, eyes squinting, nose working fast. The heat was brutal, but something stronger pulled him forward. A sound, a faint whimper, then a shirt on the floor. He grabbed it, and a few feet away, behind a table, a boy curled up, coughing, scared. Rusty barked once, loud and sharp. Outside, Harris spun around. That's him. A moment later, Rusty came bursting through the smoke, shirt clenched in his teeth, eyes red from heat. He found something, Harris yelled. Let's go. Firefighters followed Rusty's trail as he turned back toward the house, leading them in. Minutes later, they emerged with the boy in their arms. Alive. The crowd gasped, then cheered. Rusty stood beside the stretcher, panting hard, soot covering his fur. Harris knelt beside him, voice shaking. You did it. You did it. Rusty's tail thumped once. The boy's mother dropped to her knees. That dog, he saved my son. A firefighter nodded. He's a hero. Reporters showed up within the hour. Cameras flashed. Microphones came out. Is this the same dog from the viral video? Harris looked at Rusty, eyes full of pride. Yeah, he said. Same one, and he just saved a life. The fire chief approached, holding a small medal. For bravery under fire, he said, clipping it gently onto Rusty's collar. Rusty blinked, still catching his breath, but his head was high. Later that night, back at home, Harris sat beside him on the floor. You didn't even think twice, he whispered. You just knew. Rusty rested his head in Harris's lap. You were never just a rescue dog, Harris added. You were born for this. Outside, the city slept, but inside, a once-forgotten stray, now lay in the warmth of love, trust, and undeniable honor. The city hall steps were packed. Flags waved, kids held signs, and a red carpet stretched all the way to the podium. At the center of it all stood Rusty, his fur brushed, his collar polished, the small gold medal from the fire still shining on his chest. But Rusty wasn't looking at the cameras, he was looking at Harris. Rusty, someone shouted. Over here. Flash, flash. Reporters yelled questions, cameras buzzed, microphones pointed. Hero dog of Elm Street, bravest rescue in city history. Rusty, how does it feel? But Rusty didn't move, just sat tall, ears up, tail gently tapping the ground. Mayor Caldwell leaned down with a smile. Rusty, the city thanks you. She clipped a new medal to his collar, a shiny silver one, engraved with his name. Crowd cheered, applause echoed. The mayor posed beside him, but Rusty didn't look at her. He turned his head and locked eyes with Harris. Harris smiled from the front row, hands in his pockets, heart full. You don't care about all this, do you? He whispered. After the ceremony, people rushed forward. Can I pet him? What's his secret? Will he be on TV again? But through it all, Rusty stayed close to Harris's side, brushing against his leg like it grounded him. The noise, the attention, it didn't shake him, because none of it mattered. Later, as they walked back to the car, a reporter caught up. Officer Harris, what do you think Rusty's feeling right now? Harris paused, hand resting on Rusty's head. I think he's just glad he's not in that alley anymore. The reporter smiled. He doesn't need the spotlight. Harris shook his head. He doesn't need medals. He just needed someone who stayed, someone who didn't walk away. Back home, Harris hung the medal beside the fridge photo, the one of young, scared Rusty in the shelter corner. Rusty lay on the couch now, tail curled, eyes half closed. You know, Harris said, scratching behind his ear, they're calling you a hero. Rusty thumped his tail once. But I knew that the night you looked at me like I was the only person who mattered. Rusty licked his hand. Fame had found him. Headlines had praised him. The world had finally seen his worth. But Rusty, he didn't need any of it. He just needed one thing. The man who fed him when no one else did, and never stopped. The evening had started quiet. Harris sat on the couch, reading the paper, one hand resting on Rusty's back. The TV murmured in the background, some old cop show playing. Rusty snoozed peacefully, head on Harris's knee. Then it happened. A sharp pain. Harris gripped his chest, face twisting. The paper slipped from his hand. He tried to stand, but his legs gave out. He crumpled to the floor with a soft thud. Rusty jolted awake. At first, he didn't understand. Then he saw Harris, eyes shut, breathing wrong, and Rusty knew. He barked, loud, sharp, again and again. No answer. He ran to the door and clawed at it, barking harder, louder. He howled, scratched, slammed his body against the wood. Someone, he seemed to scream, help him. Across the hall, a neighbor frowned. What's going on over there? The barking didn't stop. Another neighbor joined. Then someone knocked, then kicked the door open. Harris lay on the floor, barely conscious. Call an ambulance, a voice shouted. Rusty didn't leave his side, not for a second. At the hospital, machines beeped, nurses rushed. A doctor stepped into the waiting area where neighbors waited, Rusty pacing in circles on the tile floor. Are you the ones who brought him in? The doctor asked. One neighbor nodded. Because of his dog. The doctor knelt, looking at Rusty. Then he owes his life to you, buddy. Hours later, Harris opened his eyes, weak, tired, but alive. Rusty sat beside the hospital bed, tail thumping softly. You loud little traitor, Harris croaked with a faint smile. Rusty let out a small, happy bark, then rested his chin on the bed. A nurse laughed. He hasn't moved all night. He's been guarding the room like it's Fort Knox. The doctor entered. You had a mild cardiac episode. If your dog hadn't reacted so fast. He didn't finish the sentence. But Harris already knew. He reached over and stroked Rusty's head. You saved me. Rusty nuzzled closer. You remember? Harris whispered. You remember everything I did for you. Rusty closed his eyes, tail wagging gently. He was no longer the dog who begged for bread in the cold. He was a rescuer, a guardian, and that night, when Harris needed someone most, Rusty didn't freeze, didn't wait. He acted, because love doesn't forget, and neither do the ones we save, when they turn around and save us right back. The seasons came and went. Rusty's muzzle turned white. His eyes, once sharp and alert, now held a cloudy haze. The spring in his step faded to a careful shuffle, but his heart, steady, strong, unchanging. Every morning Harris laced up his boots, fastened his belt, and reached for the keys. And every morning without fail, Rusty stood at the door. Sometimes it took a little longer to get there. Some days he needed help getting up. But still he came. I'll be back soon, partner, Harris would say, crouching to scratch behind Rusty's ears. Hold down the fort, all right? Rusty would blink up at him, tail wagging once, like a promise. Then Harris would leave, and Rusty would sit by the door. Minutes, hours. He never napped far from it. The neighbors noticed. He's still got that watch in him, Mrs. Elkins said with a chuckle, peeking through her blinds. Like he's guarding something sacred, her husband added. Because to Rusty that door was sacred. It was the last place he saw Harris before he left, and the first place he'd be when Harris came home. Every footstep in the hallway made his ears twitch. Every key in a lock made him stand, hope, rising in his tired chest. And every time Harris returned, he was greeted like a hero. You really waited all day again? Harris would ask, setting his cap on the hook. Rusty would just wag his tail, lean into his leg, and sigh with contentment. They didn't take long walks anymore. Just slow strolls to the mailbox, or across the yard where Rusty could sniff the breeze. Some days were harder than others. Cold mornings stiffened his joints. Loud noises still startled him. But he always looked for Harris, always believed he'd return. Because that's what love does, it waits. No matter how long, no matter how old. Harris once told a rookie, you want to know what loyalty looks like? Come to my house at 5 p.m. The kid laughed. What'll I see? A graying old mutt with bad hips, Harris replied, sitting by the door like the president's about to walk in. Rusty didn't care about medals, titles, or time. He just cared about that door, and the man behind it. Because even as the world changed, and his body slowed, Rusty never stopped believing. And every evening when that key turned, his faith was rewarded all over again. The air was gentle that evening, the kind of spring breeze that carried memories. Harris parked the cruiser farther up the road, the engine ticking as it cooled. He stepped out slowly, a little heavier now, joints not what they used to be. He opened the passenger door, and Rusty, old, but still proud, stepped down with careful pause. They made their way to that spot. Near the edge of the highway, just off a quiet curve, stood an old tree, gnarled, weathered, familiar. The place where a broken dog once watched a tired officer eat his sandwich. The place where everything changed. Harris laid down a blanket. Rusty lowered himself beside him, with a soft groan, his gray muzzle resting gently on Harris's leg. The city bustled in the distance, but here it was still, timeless. "You remember this place?" Harris asked quietly, stroking behind Rusty's ear, the way he always liked. Rusty blinked slowly, leaned in. "You were just a shadow back then," Harris murmured, eyes misting. "I thought I was helping you." He paused. "But you saved me too, boy." Rusty's breathing was slower now, more labored, but his body pressed closer like he understood every word. They sat like that for a long while, watching the sun dip below the trees, the highway lights flickering on in the fading dusk. That moment didn't need words. It was full. Later others would come. Neighbors, fellow officers, even strangers who knew the story. Someone planted wildflowers by the tree, and one morning a bench appeared, polished wood, simple, strong. Engraved on a small brass plate were just a few words: "In honor of Officer Harris and Rusty, two souls who saved each other." It became a place people visited when they needed a reminder that even in a dark alley, hope can find you, that loyalty still exists, that healing comes, sometimes in fur, sometimes in silence. And long after the tree aged, and the highway grew busier, that bench stayed, waiting, because some stories don't fade. They settle into the roots, and live on. Watch what happened on their final walk. You won't believe what Rusty did next. It happened on a quiet morning. The sun hadn't fully risen, just a soft glow through the curtains. Harris stirred awake, not from any sound, but from the silence. The kind you feel. Rusty lay curled at the foot of the bed, right beside Harris's boots, his favorite spot. The old dog's chest didn't rise, no twitch of the ear, no sigh, just stillness. Harris sat up slowly, heart already breaking. He reached down, resting a hand on Rusty's back. Still warm, still peaceful. Gone. No cries echoed through the house. No dramatic goodbye. Just the end of a long, loyal journey. Word spread fast, not because of an announcement, but because the town felt it. Kids who had grown up watching Rusty at the park left flowers outside the station. Someone taped a drawing to the bench near the highway, a crayon sketch of Rusty with angel wings. The mayor gave a statement. Schools held a moment of silence. Officers, hardened by years of crime scenes and sirens, wiped their eyes when no one was looking. And Harris? He grieved quietly. The house felt different, emptier. Yes, but not hollow. Rusty had filled it with something permanent. Weeks later, Harris walked into a shelter. He wasn't trying to replace Rusty. That would be impossible. But when he saw a nervous little mutt with wide eyes and a trembling tail, he knew. "You need a home?" Harris asked gently. The dog stepped forward, just like before. No name, no history, just a chance. He brought him home, gave him a blanket, no kennel, no chains. And on his desk at the station, Rusty's photo stayed, framed in wood, placed with care. Some people asked why he never moved it. Harris would just smile. Because he's still on duty. Years would pass, the new dog would grow, life would go on. But Rusty's story, it never really ended. Because some dogs don't just walk beside you. They teach you to be softer, stronger, braver. They break your rules, then fix your heart. They don't just enter your life, they change it, forever. See the full story of Rusty and Harris come to life. Watch their journey now. So share this story, let Rusty's legacy live on. Because someone out there needs to hear it today. Subscribe to hear more stories that touch the heart.